He joined the Royal Australian Navy directly from secondary school in 1993 and undertook studies at the Australian Defence Force Academy, graduating in 1995 and qualifying as a logistics officer in 1996. Any boos from the audience? He has undertaken a range of shore postings along with sea postings to HMAS ships Hobart, Melbourne and Toowoomba, for which he was a commissioning maritime logistics officer of Toowoomba. Career highlights have included an exchange posting with the Royal Navy in 2003 and 4, where he provided direct support to 22 vessels. He also held command of HMAS Coonawarra during 2012 and 13, where the team was awarded the Governor's Cup. In 2015, on promotion, Captain Favelle was a Director, Patrol Boat Systems Program Office, where he's responsible for the sustainment support of 15 Armidale and Cape-class patrol boats in support of Operation Resolute during periods of high tempo. In 2018 to 2020, Captain Favelle took a short career break where he worked as an asset manager in the oil and gas industry. Having accumulated this new experience, he returned to full-time service and was appointed as the inaugural Capability Managers Representative for the Defence Marine Support Services Group in 2020. Operational service has included a deployment to the Persian Gulf in 2002 in support of United Nations sanctions on board HMAS Melbourne, where he was a boarding officer, deputy supply officer and helicopter control officer. For this deployment, he's awarded a Chief of Navy Commendation. A deployment to the United Nations mission in Sudan in 2007 and 8, where he supported peacekeeping operations and preparations for the referendum for the establishment of South Sudan. A deployment on border protection duties in 2005 and 14, where he provided logistics support to ships serving in support of Operation Relax 2 and Operation Resolute. In addition to this operational service, Captain Favelle served as J45 in Joint Operation Command in 2023. Captain Favelle assumed command of HMAS Service in December 2023, coming full circle, noting that his first posting as a qualified supply officer was for service in 1996. Captain Favelle holds, now here we go. Captain Favelle holds a master's degree in management and strategy, graduate diploma in integrated logistics support, graduate diploma in logistics, graduate diploma in defence studies, and postgraduate qualification in accounting. He is a graduate of the Australian Command and Staff course in Canberra, holds a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Politics from the University of New South Wales. Wow. That's very impressive, sir. Captain Favelle is married to Mary and they have 3 teenage boys. Captain Favelle is an AFL, it's got fan here, but I can say tragic. And it does say in the Kangaroos tragic. And Sir Jim Dixon, who we all fondly know, his grandson is the full forward for North Melbourne, and they've been able to get together and he presented something to you for your birthday. Yeah. He enjoys four-wheel driving, reading, camping, playing guitar, and has found himself in the phase of life where he's often standing on the side of sporting fields on weekends. We've all been there and done that. Captain Favelle was awarded Conspicuous Service Cross in the 2004 King's Birthday Honours for outstanding devotion to duty and as Captain, Defence and Marine Support Services Group. Welcome aboard, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a lot of jargon in that, wasn't there? I will apologise. There was a lot of jargon in that, and there'll be a bit tonight. And I did give Andy some options for what I might come and speak about, including some with genuine heritage value But he said, come and speak about this one. You might have heard Marty said that I took some time outside the Navy and then came back. I'm going to talk to you about the establishment of the Defence Marine Support Services kind of contract and construct. It's what I came back to the Navy to do, and anyone that's tried to leave and then come back, it drew me back because a friend rang me and said, Ben, there's a job here, we can't fill it, it's got your name all over it, come back for it. He was Bernard York of the York dynasty, and I'm very grateful that he did. And it turned out to be the job that I did when I got that Conspicuous Service Cross. So, it shows through when you love a job. It does show through in how you lead your team. We got some okay results, but so essentially I'm going to talk to you about the Fleet Marine Services contract. Used to be a contract that provided tugboats, large hull vessels, small ribs, and there'll be pictures here, so picture tells 1,000 words. And also some small boats. So, how many? I just want to know whether where to pitch this. How many have served in the Navy? Yep. How many are interested in the Navy? Yep. How many? They weren't the same hands that went up. I'm not sure to make it that. But pull me up if there's jargon on there because I don't expect you to know some of the jargon that I do use. I have leveraged some work content that I've used in meetings to brief the Admiral, so I'm not sure what to make of that. But I must be selective with some of the things I say because we're on the air. So I'm going to talk to you about how we restructured it, what we did, how we set up the team. So it's a little bit commercial. It's a little bit of a insight into what ships we've got out there in the fleet, and just some of our current issues. So feel free, Marty, to move me along if I'm taking too long, or I'm happy to take questions throughout, whichever way, however it goes. So that's what it was called. It was the Fleet Marine Services contract, and then we set up the Defence Marine Support Services network. And so I thought that was worth signing back on for. It was a mouse already. See a mouse? It's alright, I'll just hit the keyboard. So, to get any project approved these days, you have to have a joint capability needs statement. This is what the Admiral said we needed to do. So he said it will bring many marine services together. It will enhance the efficiency, eliminate cost and service duplication by enhancing value for money, establishing an end-to-end enterprise approach to governance and seaworthiness. Seaworthiness is a concept for those that haven't been close to Navy for some time. It came out of a review called the Rizzo Review. Probably some of us grew up in the age where it was a can-do, and some of those defects that the ship used to carry, you would say, sir, we can go to sea, knowing that there were defects and there was some risks associated with that. The seaworthiness lens now, it doesn't mean that we can't do that anymore, but they have to be known knowns and not just sort of shoot from the hip type stuff. So the objective was that we would improve our approach to seaworthiness for these vessels, and you'll see there were some old vessels in this fleet that did need that approach. And then the maximising of innovation by the use of industry, and so you'll also see that there's a number of companies that you'll see me talk about during this presentation who will be known to you, and they came and helped us solve problems. It's the way a lot of navies going these days. This one is alphabet soup. I'll tell you one thing though. Marty mentioned the Systems Program Office. So I'll mention the term SPO a fair bit. A SPO is a Systems Program Office. Basically, the project team that manages the contracts to do the maintenance and operate the vessels. So they're public servants, they're military people, and some contractors. But so I'll use the term SPO a fair bit. Can I have your permission to do that? Yeah. So this is what we set up. It's gonna. I'll step away from here and just talk through the alphabet soup. This is the organisation we set up, Defence Marine Support Services Group, and I was the captain of that group. They were all the functions that we performed inside that group. So previously, the Fleet Marine Services contract, it was there was less governance, put it that way. Some people would argue that was better, and they got it done quicker. But you must have this governance these days. So this is HNC division. This is Canberra Navy office on the left-hand side there. So they're the people that will buy new ships for us. So we established those links that hadn't previously existed. Believe it or not, some of the ships that I'll show you, they'd all been bought on credit. And so we had a line of credit with the National Australia Bank. Introducing the interest rates wouldn't be much fun right now. This gave us access to the big dollars in Canberra in order to renew our fleet. And you'll see with the age of our vessels, we did need access to that. So we established a new link with Canberra that never previously existed. I mentioned SPOs, so there won't be a test on what they all stand for, but there were 3 different sustainment organisations that we brought in that would oversee the engineering standards on board those ships. They would hold those new commercial industry partners to account, because you bring them in and you cooperate with them, but you also got to keep an eye on them, and you have to incentivise them and you have to pay them. So we brought these 3 new players, these 3 new SPOs, into the game. And I'll talk about the different parts of the fleet tonight, and each of them sort of looked after one parcel of the fleet. And then over here, we realised that who do we use these tugs, these small boats, and these large hull vessels for? It's not just Navy, to be honest. We realised we were supporting Border Force, other agencies, and there was a real view that if you've seen the Cape-class vessels out there, you'll know that Border Force are doing their best to maintain them and sustain them, but they're having a pretty tough time. So I think we were laying the foundation to help Border Force out here, maybe, and other government agencies. So it'll remain to be seen whether we go further into that. So enough on that. I won't labour the point, but we reorganised the organisation so that you'd have a customer and a supplier, basically. And so I was a customer, and each of these SPOs, overseeing the industry guys, was the supplier, really. And having been in one of those as a director, and in that one as a customer, I would much rather be the customer, I'll just say that. So we use the term, again, a little bit of jargon warning here, we use the term service pack. It's just, we could have almost said fleet, but we broke there were 70 odd vessels into 4 service packets. And so let's say they're fleets, really, 4 different fleets. Just going through, firstly, the service package 1, that was general harbour services. It was focused on in-harbour activities using the smaller vessels. So if you ever did a boat transfer from your ship to shore, and you went ashore on leave, or you had some stores delivered, all the boats and all the services that we wanted to use were in that fleet. Out-of-port services, and I'll have some pictures of some large hull vessels. That was another service pack, and it focused on another contractor that operated those almost fully. And then the third one was the tugs. We called it towing services, and we actually, to make it a little more business-like, we had to define, it was pretty hard, but we had to define how many times we would want to use a tug, what time of day it would be, and anyone that's been at sea before knows that a commanding officer doesn't like to be told he can only have a tugboat during certain hours, at certain days, and so there were across the board here, there was a fair bit of expectation management. And service package 4 was the fleet of sea boats, the rigid hull inflatable boats, just like what you'd see, I guess a souped up version of what you might see at the surf club on the weekend. And so they were the 4 fleets that we split the 70 or 80 odd vessels that we had into, so that they were manageable sizes. Again, I'll spare you the jargon, but you see there the top point. We did this thing called a sea release assurance framework. So we pulled out the civilian rules from AMSA, and we pulled out some of our own rules where we couldn't find a relevant AMSA rule, and we applied them across the fleet. So, and it gave us some results where we just had to get rid of some vessels, and I'll talk about that. It's all about money these days. The Navy Sustainment Review Board, they knew that they said we could only have the same size cake. We could cut it up in different sizes, but it's the same budget. What they did say though is that we could come to the Navy Sustainment Review Board, and having worked in this environment before, I was pretty comfortable that if you gave me access to an admiral, I could argue for more money, and so that was a real step up here, was to get access to money. What else is relevant there? I'm just going to skip down to, so we have to also be quite defined about an operating support intent. We have to say how we're going to use these vessels, not just drive it like we stole it. We have to say how we're going to use it and hold ourselves accountable to use those vessels. So we developed a bunch of documents which you have to have for every ship these days. It said where we would operate the ship, how long it would be at sea for, how fast it needed to go, where what sea state it might be exposed to, and so you can only be a good asset manager when you know how your assets can be employed. We also, I'll show you the large hull vessels shortly, but we also had a disciplined. There are more requests of the Navy fleet than we have days available and resources available. So we had a disciplined tasking system. We also, like I say, we leveraged, most of our vessels actually carried a red ensign, and they still do. We struck some rules where if it's a large hull vessel and it's in foreign waters or it's approaching foreign waters, you can hoist the white ensign. But most of our, the principle of simplifying it meant that we would have the red ensign on board most of our vessels, and we would follow the red ensign rules. Enough. So just going through each of those bundles, you'll see, you might see a few. Anyone been on a stepper? Terry, whatever, come on. No, a stepper. They're a stepper craft, Aussie ship, an Aussie boat, about 40 foot. We've got probably 20 of those. So we also had in here towed targets. So you'll see it says 570 assets. That was half of this activity was just about what the hell we had, who was managing it. There were things hidden in dockyards all around the place, and it took a little bit of finding. So you start by just cataloguing what you've got and then assessing what the conditions are. And so this ultimately got awarded to a company called Serco. Everyone would have heard of Serco. They have strengths and weaknesses. Ironically, I'd had a bad time with Serco in a previous job, but I think they performed pretty well, here to be honest. And they were the incumbent contractor, and they won it again. And so these are the tasks that we would use. These stebbers, plus about 15 or 20 other variants of small inshore boats. So if you were to walk past any boat compound in any of the Navy bases around Australia, you'd see these guys, plus the black and whites. Beautiful old boats, but most of them didn't. If something had happened and Navy had been taken to court, you couldn't hold up the registration documents that said, we've got a roadworthy for this thing. That's basically it was a voyage of discovery. So these were all the tasks that we use those vessels for. General harbour services, which is just, like I say, a boat transfer from one ship to another, or from ship to shore. Waterborne security patrols, training support. So the divers were a big customer of ours. They've got their own version of a dive stepper that can carry a gas chamber, a recompression chamber. There are stores and fuel barges as well. There were also mooring support, and the Old Admiral's barge. If anyone saw the Old Admiral's barge, it was in this bundle. So that they were the small inshore boats. So whereas they'd been lumped in with the inshore boats, the ribs, and the large hull vessels, we separated them. We found a discrete contractor who was good at managing services and good at managing simple assets. They won this one. So that was Serco. This was actually, we built up some pretty serious tonnage in Service Pack 2, the Albert Port fleet. If anyone saw in the fires in Malakuta, MV Sycamore was this vessel here. They went in and picked up a bunch of people off the beach and dropped them off down Service, actually. It might have been Hastings, actually. But between them and Jules, they were a contracted vessel. Probably got the red ensign on it. In fact, that's been painted. As you can see, it's got it's cut up down the back. I think it had just come out of dock in Garden Island at that time. But in this bundle, in this service pack, in this fleet, it was large hull vessels. So it was like managing, the frigate guys get pretty excited about themselves, but there was probably more tonnage and there was certainly more days at sea that we were delivering with these vessels. This ship, for example, so TK Shipping won this one. Has anyone heard of TK Shipping? No, I think they're a Canadian company, but they were a can-do company, or they are a can-do company. So they would have a civilian master on there, a civilian crew. We'd stick one naval officer on there to say, this is where I need you to be at this time, and you need to do it safely. So I remember being on board Sycamore. Like it was built largely as an aviation vessel. I remember being on there one day. So there was a trainee officer flying a helicopter down to land on the flight deck. There was a trainee flight deck marshaller. There was a trainee helicopter control officer on the radio. There was a trainee officer of the watch. All supervised by civilian AMSA qualified crew. And so if that's not a good training situation, I don't know what is. If you're anyone that's spent time in the Navy and has worked with helicopters will know it's actually hard to get the ship to just go up and down in a line and get the helicopters to achieve their training objectives. This ship was dedicated to that. It also, there's 70 odd bunks on board, and so cadets come on board there, all manner of different trainees come on board. So it's a wonderful vessel. I think I'll show you the pictures, and that will tell the story. So we had Sycamore, I've spoken about. We had ADV, stands for Australian Defence Vessel, which means that they can haul either the white ensign or the Australian national flag, and that gives them greater diplomatic protections if they need to board a vessel or intercept a vessel or the like. So we had Ocean Protector, which you'll see in a moment. Again, crewed by TK Shipping, just a small crew of Navy folk on there, telling the master when they needed to be there, where they needed to be, and how they needed to do it. So that was a success. And then Mercator, this little boat down here. I reckon that was one in the fleet that was older than me. So I just turned 50. So it was definitely built in the 1970s anyway. And we inspected it, found a bunch of rust in it, had to cut and renew, they called it. Whole heap of the bilges in order to keep it seaworthy. But to be honest, it really just stays in Sydney Harbour, and many a junior officer, I think if you asked the Admiral about it, he probably would have had his bum kicked on the bridge of that thing by a senior navigator. Again, TK Shipping operated. The bridge training team from Watson do embark on it, and they bring their real baby midshipmen to try to stress them out. So they've done their classroom stuff, but they're doing phase 2 on there largely. So, and they'll do a run, they'll do a high five. The other midshipmen will come in and make an attempt at it. So, again, another TK one. So Basant and Stoker, I'll show you shortly pictures of those. They're submarine escape and rescue vessels who, you'll see the size of these things, hundreds of tonnes, but they were doing probably 40 sea days each. That's all we could afford to do under the old model. We've now got them up at over several hundred. And Basant and Stoker, like they're purpose designed to be submarine rescue vessels, so they've got all the medical facilities on them, recompression chambers and the like. But we thought sea days are quite important at the moment. To take, if it meant that we could stop a frigate being taken off their high-end warfare training in order for just a vessel that needs to be on patrol on Operation Resolute, it enabled us to free up the warfighting fleet by using some auxiliary vessels, essentially, and so it was quite popular with the rest of the Navy. And then I'll show you a picture as well of 2 new ships that we bought very quickly. I think I've talked about that now. I don't think any of you are going to bid for the tasking of it, so I won't tell you about the tasking model. But this was a slide that we used to tell our customers, if you want one of these vessels, you're going to have to bid for it, and you'll be compared with others. So this was Ocean Protector. Her sole duty has been, and always has been, Operation Resolute. She's got a dynamic positioning on her, so she can just stay in one location without an officer watch, or without going to anchor. So they can stay in one location. They can monitor the horizon and perform that border protection role. They don't tend to use, that's a helicopter deck up there. They don't tend to use that, but in an emergency they could. This is either Basant or Stoker. I think that's Stoker because that's Basant, and they're launching the rescue vessel that goes down to rescue submarines in a horrible instance that we have to do that. So that's what they're purpose built for. But we thought if you're only using them for 40 days a year, or perhaps more if the submarine is operating at a higher tempo, that gives you a hell of a lot more days that you could be using on Operation Resolute. And so that was pretty popular once we found the funds for it. Just another view of the Basant operating with a submarine there. Usually when a submarine has gone and done their a refit, they go through a licensing process when they come out of refit, which means they just step through incrementally more and more complex evolutions, and therefore they have an escape and rescue ship alongside them while they're going through the motions. Any submariners in the audience? I can say what I wanted. And that's the other one. That's Stoker launching the rescue vehicle. Ocean Protector. That was one that we bought in my time, and I've never seen a Canberra project move so quickly as when we decided we wanted to buy a large hull vessel off the spot market. Normally a defence project, you define what you want, you make it almost impossible for industry to provide it to you. Takes years, exchanging tenders and responses, and you talk each other up and down. When we decided we wanted to buy a commercial vessel off the market, this wasn't the first one that we got. We actually missed out on one. I've never seen we went through due process, but it got sped up in order to keep up with the spot market. And so this, I think it was Norwegian. We bought it, we did our due diligence on it, did a maintenance period on it, painted it North Melbourne colours, and then brought it back. So that's out there. It's a good story because the government was very keen for us to increase our presence in the Pacific. So this is our Pacific support vessel. It is watch on, stop on out in the Pacific at the moment. It's like having a big ute, and the crane on the back of it is in excess of 100 tonnes. So as much as anything, we're carrying DFAT stores, any humanitarian assistance stores that need to be delivered, spare parts under the Defence Cooperation Program. So it spends more time away. It has again, it's TK shipping. They have a dual crew, so they'll fly in and fly out in the cruise. And we have one or two Navy liaison officers on board there, again, saying this is where you need to be by this time, by this date, and TK get us there. really capable ship. It had been used for rig tenders. Has got all sorts of tanks on it. We're still working out what might even be possible with this thing. So that was Reliant. This was a tug fleet. Really, really old, but it was good that Spitzer won this. They, alongside TK, probably one of the more professional of the contractors that we locked in. It was a little bit confronting for us that Spitzer wanted to manage all of our tugboat operations from, I think it was Newcastle, is where their head office is. So if we put in a request, it goes to Newcastle, and we're used to walking up to the master attendant in Sydney and poke him in the chest if it doesn't turn up on time. So we had to get a bit more businesslike and a bit more disciplined, but they helped us get there. Again, it was managed by one of those SPOs that I would talk about. One of the other tasks that these vessels are charged with is that when a nuclear-powered warship, so an aircraft carrier, visits, these vessels, they take the Spitzer guys ashore and they bring on uniformed masters in the event that there's an issue with a nuclear reactor, and they are essentially managed in accordance with OPSMAN 1, which means that they would be towed offshore, to be honest. So fortunately that hasn't happened, and it's very, very unlikely to happen, but what it meant is that we had to come up with a crewing model where a uniformed crew could come on and relieve the Spitzer crew. And I'm an economist, market forces prevailed, so we ended up with a bunch of Navy people going and getting their tug tickets, and tug masters joining the Navy Reserve. And in order to do that, we had to break some rules and pay them a bit more and pay the market prices. So it was senior sailors and junior officers getting paid probably as much as a commander might. So shock horror. And then I mentioned the ribs. There's the specifications of the ribs. RIB stands for Rigid Hull Inflatable Boat. Most large ships that you see out there have got at least 2 of these on board. If you need to intercept another ship, it's done by one of these. You put some sailors in it. In fact, you put some sailors in 2 ribs, they'll go and they'll intercept another ship. Equally, if someone falls overboard, you'll launch one of these boats and it'll basically turn around and recover the man overboard. We tried, and we still are, managing this one in-house, so we didn't go and get a contractor for it. We got another part of Defence, the Joint Logistics Command, and they went and got a contractor, so it all ends with contractors these days. Yeah, so look, it worked okay. It worked okay, and the availability that they delivered was pretty good. Probably the greatest thing we found with these is they're getting old and they just need to be replaced. So if you remember, I said we established those links to Canberra, which is where the money is. We've been progressively renewing this fleet, and so yeah, another success story, I think. Yeah, what discipline did it bring to us? We had to say what our rate of effort would be, how many days we wanted to do at sea. We had to say when we would be operating it, and there were exceptions. You just pay for it. So we specified that. In fact, we look back at all of our old data, and all of our general harbour services occurred between 6 in the morning and 1800. Shock horror. Navy doesn't like to work at night. We come in and we've run ashore by 1800. So, but we did have some flexibility sat outside of there, but we had enough confidence to say to our contractors, most of them are going to be between 0600 and 1800. And so you might need one guy after hours, but most of your workforce, if they've knocked off by 1800, that's okay. And we saved some money by doing that. What we did do, second from the bottom there, was a bit controversial. We looked back at how many of these import, if you remember the import vessels, we looked back at how many of those have been used for recreational purposes, how many times junior officers had run them aground or run into people, or they'd made their way onto the paper doing the wrong thing, not wearing the right uniforms or drinking or yahooing. It had happened too much. The Admiral said, that's enough. No more recreational use of those vessels. So it's a sad day for some, because but when we looked at most of the recent data. It had been mainly the captains and commodores that had been doing it. So, yeah, a bit too much detail in that one. So these are all the ones that we disposed of. If you spend time in the Navy, you'd probably know the old workboats. But you can see on the right-hand side, so left-hand side is the name of the assets. I said that we had to go through and catalogue everything and check out their condition. Left-hand side is the asset, right-hand side is the finding. And you can see not in survey, not in class, not in survey, not in class. And as we start to want to manage risk in Navy, it's not okay to put trainees and our people out there in vessels that are not in survey and not in class. The thing that was a little bit hard to reconcile was that they looked fine. They just didn't meet the contemporary standards. What we did find was a lot of rust. We found a lot of machinery that was not supported, and so it was the right thing to do. The fleet had not been contemporised for a long time. So a lot of workboats disposed of. Some of the old Swarbrick yachts, if there's any yachties that had done any sailing with Navy, were disposed of. The Tasars were also disposed of, but have been replaced since by Quest dinghies. So there was a lot of emotion in that because they looked and seemed okay, and it goes on. More of those workboats, all in the name of seaworthiness. So I think it was about 40 vessels. What we did do when we said to the admirals, we're going to be disciplined about how many serials we'll do, like what's your rate of effort going to be, how many times are you going to want to use this barge. This slide, I don't expect you to understand it fully, but what the purpose it served was that we said, under the old regime, this is how many you use, sir, and you're going to have more. Every time there was either a green or an amber, they had just as much, if not more, in terms of availability for general harbour services, bunker barges and the like. And the truth was, where there's a red arrow, we could still do it, but we had to pay for it. So we just got a little bit more disciplined across the board. So we're coming towards the end of just some reflections. And I do appreciate this is not a heritage topic, it's just a topic of interest. Hopefully it has been. So some of my reflections and challenges is that we normalise and modernise the business model as opposed to having a bunch of vessels that were not being well managed. We brought in a more disciplined regime. Probably the fun part was the new acquisition of the Pacific support vessel that I mentioned. The disposals was a difficult one. They had to send me into witness protection after that one because there was a lot of emotion and history in that. But if they didn't make the standard, I had the Admiral's blessing, and so we just applied it. We did have some exposure to industrial action. You think about Spitzer, you think about the Maritime Union, you think about Serco. Industrial relations is not something we generally have to think about in the Navy. We've got a very compliant workforce, thankfully, but more than once since then we've not come unstuck, but there's been a bit of brinkmanship. I think the workforce in Spitzer and the workforce in Serco can appreciate where they're in a pretty powerful situation. So during exercise Kakadu, when most we needed tugmasters, they were having a little bit of a moment with their management chain, so they made a point of it. But generally, it's brinkmanship. They prove their point and then they get the job done. And if it wasn't, we could take them to the Fair Work because if it's not protected, you can challenge that. I spoke about the big line of credit that we had with the National Australia Bank. It still exists, but it's better managed now. So all of those vessels, even some of those that we disposed, there was some finance on them because of the previous arrangement under the Fleet Marine Services contract. BMs, boatswain's mates, we are tracking towards getting more sailors in boats to provide security in naval waters, which Marty mentioned I was the commanding officer of HMAS Coonawarra. One unfortunate day at HMAS Coonawarra, we had someone steal some weapons from there, and I wanted, you might have seen it on the news in 2012, but I just wanted some bosuns to get in a boat and go and do some patrols in the water to make sure that it didn't turn out to be a seaward attack. It was a ratbag sailor, to be honest. So, and fortunately, he tried to sell the weapons to the dumbest person in Darwin. But had we had more bosuns at that time, we might have been able to have a greater presence in the water and deter it. That's what we're tracking towards now. So, while I said that Serco are providing a lot of those import boating services, we're clawing back some of those, and with AUKUS and the need for, I'm not close to AUKUS, but I know our US friends prefer sailors, and so I can see some work happening in that space where we have increased presence of bosun's mates driving our boats, and like I said down the bottom, bringing those large hull vessels onto Operation Resolute meant that our frigates could go and concentrate on their warfare, and our destroyers could do the same. So that was pretty popular, and that was a success. Here's the end of my slideshow. So, what I would say is it was definitely worth coming back for me. I might say there's no heritage value, but there was some boats in there that were, like I say, older than me. They did need a ruler run over the top of them. I'm not a technical person, but I learned how to speak technical in conjunction with my engineers, and I learned how to apply the answer rule set, and that pretty much spat out all of the answers. And we created that access to Canberra to create those lines of funding so we could renew the fleet. And that's the guy that came in after me is doing the fun part. I did the hard part of disposing the old stuff. He's buying the new stuff now, so you'll have to invite him in for an update on how he's gone during this time. But really, that's where I'll probably leave it. The risk of hitting you with more jargon. I'm pretty sure it's pretty heavy on jargon, but hopefully you got the gist of. We took a pretty unregulated, large fleet that didn't have the engineering and the commercial oversight, and we put that over the top of it, and we used industry to do a better job of it. And our customers were all pretty happy. So, yeah, I'll probably leave it there, mate. But happy to take questions if there's time.
Just what I was hoping you would bring up was more discussion on submarines and how the submariners and vessels would be brought into the equation. But in listening all the way through, it's probably a totally different classification.
Well, they were a customer, so we actually had to. What was most relevant for them was that the Besant and the Stoker. If you remember those two red ships that I showed you, they're submarine escape rescue vessels. They believed they were theirs and theirs only, but they only used them for 40 odd days each per year. And if you can think, you're paying for the crew to be there, you're paying for the vessel to be maintained. We had to wrestle those extra days back from them. At least one of those is on patrol on water protection at the moment. I actually had a ex-South African submarine captain and special forces guy who's still a submarine captain at the moment on one of our current Commons class. He came to work for us, so it made it a little bit easier to speak to the submariners. If it was a logistics officer saying, "We're going to take your pride and joy off you," the message was a little bit easier to solve with Darren selling that message. But with better planning or with more disciplined planning, we could still meet all of the commitments that the submariners needed to be. We were there when they were doing their licensing. And the truth is that model, if something goes wrong with a submarine, a key part of what we do is we stick it in the back of a plane, fly that plane to wherever their submarine's in distress, and we use whichever vessel is available anyway. So it would be an absolute fluke if Besant and Stoker were in that same location at that time. Quite often, what we do is just find a craft of opportunity in that area that would be able to help us. So the core business there really is moving the escape and rescue gear around. Yeah, so the submariners were a customer. They were initially concerned, but they were as satisfied as they were under the old model. I think, if you remember, I called it Service Pack 1, but the import boats and the tugs, they have specific needs when they interface with a Collins class submarine. The fendering setup is quite particular, and they don't like you punching into the hull of a submarine. So they did want their own dedicated tugboats, and so we gave them that inside that small fleet. So they're a demanding customer, but they're think about how big the Indian Ocean is. They're a key part of the solution out there. We have to enable them. I think there'll be more security work for that small fleet. So, like I said, when the it's fair to say because it's been reported in the papers, but when the Hawaii came and did their maintenance period over in Western Australia just recently, like a couple of months ago, they did want a much higher presence of boats in the water to deter anyone that was up to no good. And so they achieved that with some of our vessels, but had to bring some others in, which would say to me that AUKUS will demand more boats. We'll need more boats. Yeah.
Anyway, just coming back to your salary bit, if he's looking for crew, just pass on my name.
I will, yeah. It took him about 4 weeks, and he said, I want to go and off Resolute. And he put himself in the watch bill, and he took off up to Christmas Island. So he didn't go on for 6 weeks. But it was Special Forces, so I was going to take him on. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Charlotte and Cerberus, I think, and Lady Penryn. How many of that class of sailboats are left around Australia now?
They're all gone because they're based on naval architect advice. The fiberglass was not going to last much.
Are they going to be replaced?
So we still have Navy 1, so you'll still... Yeah. Again, some difficult truths. So Comtrain, the Commodore Huxtable at the time, said, and this will be a tough sell in this room, I think, but he said sail training is not a mandatory part of Navy training. He said we should have yachts or sailing dinghies, but there's a lot of pressure on the training environment to get a sailor or an officer in that end and out that end as quick as possible. And so it was an informed decision. They took sailing out as part of the curriculum. You could still sign out a boat if you wanted to go sailing down at Creswell on the weekends, and you can still, but it's not a core part of recruit training. So our view is it's a sport and it's a hobby, and we encourage you to do it, and we continue to invest in Navy 1, which is a newer vessel. I can't give you the specifications in it, but it's the one that you see it on in the Sydney to Harbour every year. So your opportunity to go sail is much less these days.
And we've still got the very last of our 32 RSNA dinghies, 40-foot dinghies in the Seamanship School on display.
Do we? Oh
yeah, it's in the foyer and fully rigged.
Yeah.
And
of course we do. Yeah.
So it belongs to the museum.
Yeah.
It's there just to show what a real wooden boat looks like.
Yeah, we do. I don't know how that would go against it if we applied those AMSA standards, but it probably doesn't need to, does it?
Won't fit anywhere else.
Yeah, but some things you keep for heritage value.
Yeah.
How do you guys with government work with this? Do they lever one side or they have
Well, they're all about Resolute, so they're very happy. They're very happy that we presented, with our more disciplined tasking model, we're able to give those warships a bit of a chop out, take a boarding party, put them on board that vessel. TK Shipping would drive them to their location, and so government were happy with that. Government have also said, so this government, when they came in, one of their platforms was that they were going to re-establish as a strategic fleet. If you think of, we've got less than 10 Australian flag vessels that are large hull vessels out there at the moment. They're planning to reinvest in those. So I don't know whether they viewed us as part of that, but we reached, as we slowly brought some of those, when we brought that new vessel that I said we painted North Melbourne colours online, we tried to find 2 full crews for that. They didn't really exist. They had to, so there's definitely could be more work done with the Maritime College, I think, under the government's probable guidance, plus using some of those spare bunks that I spoke about. Like they don't need to only be used for Navy people to do their training and get their tickets signed off. It's a training vessel. Perhaps we could preserve a few bunks for TK Shipping or for the Australian Maritime College to put on there. So this was the initial reset. I reckon there's a lot of possibilities from this point on. I'm trying to think what else. The government were actually the ones who said, or maybe it was the level of management in Navy between me and the government, but they said you're not getting any more money. So they did tell us to live within our means. But I think we've proven that we're more disciplined and more business-like and a bit safer. So they're more likely to give us some funds, I suppose, if we go with a good case from this point forward.
Oh yeah. I'll be there with Mike.
There you go.
Well, very, very interesting, I'm sure. I'm certainly glad, and I'm saying on behalf of the old sailors here, we're just glad that we didn't have to work under the rules that you guys have put.
That is a genuine thing.
I'm quite serious.
Yeah.
Most of the survivors I knew barely could spell their own name. They certainly weren't managed. They certainly didn't know how to manage. I mean that sincerely as well. So what you guys are doing and under this logistic knowledge is amazing. You know, what you're doing and the accountability that goes with it. Wow. We flew by the seat of our pants most of the time and got away. We just can't do that
Didn't
anymore.
get the job done, but you're right. Yeah, there's a lot different scrutiny these days.
Accountability.
Just one question. How do you find the change of job from what you did to training a lot of sailors at recruit school?
Oh, it's a great question. Most of those were, or some of those were training vessels. You know, the Singapore that I spoke about were training vessels. I've still got contacts that enable me to get the recruits on board those vessels when they're in the region. So I guess I can leverage that. They're very different jobs. So to be honest, that was all about asset management and big dollars. My stationary budget in that job was probably more than my entire budget down Cerberus, believe it or not. So they're very different jobs, but the contacts have come in handy to get some recruits and some trainees on board some ships. Yeah, so that was the advantage, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir, and on behalf of the we'd like to present you with a little bit of
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
a tipple for tonight.
Thank you.
Some logistics.
Yeah, some logistics and supply chain works. Yes. I'm sorry I held you up. And it wasn't a heritage talk. I know. I'll come on back and I'll sit in one of your chairs one day. And there's a whole lot to learn about naval heritage. So thank you for having
Well, Ben's grandfather was a N-class sailor.
Yes.
He's still there.
Yeah, what I found out 2 weeks before I took over at Cerberus was that when ABQMG Barcham finished his time on board, which happened, I think it was Nepal, he came back to Cerberus for his last couple of weeks and he set up the golf course down there. So he built the golf course. And then he went on, so he was a professionally trained golf curator, I suppose, golf course. And then he went and built a new course down at Bridport. So he became a Republican down there. So whole other story. We could do another presentation on that. But thanks for having me. Thanks.